The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to Gone by Lunchtime. We are coming at you on Wednesday, May the 21st in the morning. It's budget week. Budget is tomorrow, on Thursday, May the 22nd in the afternoon. Fortunately, we've got a copy of the budget, and so if you stick with us till the end of the podcast, we will reveal everything that's in the budget in audiobook form. Ben Thomas, Annabelle Lee-Mather, Joey Butler and I will collaborate on that performance of the budget. Never happened before, and highly irregular, illegal even, to have a copy of the budget here. So stick around for that. But there's plenty been going on in the corridors of power in recent times to fill the top end of this podcast before we get to the audiobook of the budget. Let's begin with Te Pāti Māori, that haka, the Privileges Committee. It was 6 months ago, almost to the day, that
was it?
Yeah.
Man, that went fast, eh?
It did. You remember, November 2024, Hanarafti Maipi Clark stood in the debating chamber, tore the treaty principles bill in two, or a printout of it. I don't know if they still do have like an official.
Not the original one, not the goatskin scroll.
Not that.
It's probably the one that she got Erica Stanford to like email and print off on the.
That's right. Erica Stanford printed it for her.
Yeah.
And then she and the co-leaders of Te Pāti Māori stood and delivered a haka. Penny Henare of the Labour Party took part too. There was
quite a few MPs stood as well.
Bit of other
didn't
action
they?
involved.
Yeah.
And that was in the final vote on the Treaty Principles Bill, which
The first reading.
was it the first reading?
There was only
It was the
two.
first reading of
Oh yeah, of course it was. Of course it was. Great point of fact there, Ben Thomas. That was subsequently referred to the Privileges Committee, which is, as Andrea Geddes points out, must always be described as the all-powerful Privileges Committee.
Hannah was stood down on the day though, right?
She was sent out of the chamber, I think.
Yeah, and stood down for 24 hours.
Well, everyone was sent out of the chamber.
Oh.
But
They
no,
cleared
she was
the chamber.
named.
They
That's right. She
chamber
was
in the
named in the
galleries, yes.
house, eh?
And then when they reconvened, she was named by an exasperated Jerry Brownlee. There were two huge viral clips out of that moment. The first was Hannah doing a very stirring haka, went all around the world, hundreds of millions
Erica
of views.
Badu posted it.
And the second was the POV.
Yeah.
You have just started a haka against the speaker's wishes, and with Jerry sitting in the chair going like, don't do
that. Just stop. Oh, like someone watching their misbehaving pet pissing on the carpet for the 1,000th time or something. The sort of loss of
like TFW. You woke up and realised it is only Tuesday.
So that went to the all-powerful Privileges Committee. The Penny Henare apologised, and that was that. The three Te Pāti Māori MPs was a bit of a no-show, and then they wanted to attend later on as together rather than individually. Various back and forth, and then
they wanted to be able to put forward the evidence of a tikanga expert who would appear in front of the committee, and I think didn't they want Chris Finlayson to represent them or?
Oh yeah, sure. What do you want? Americana? Yeah.
Hey, what about our order?
Did you get that?
Hello.
Did you get that on the? That was just
I'll have a
Ben
locker,
Thomas
thank you,
looking
Ben.
to one of his lackeys and saying, "Sure, Americano."
It wasn't my lackey. That was my that was a colleague. I don't have any lackeys. I wish I had lackeys.
Same.
That was a kind colleague offering to get me a coffee. I thought about saying, "Sorry, I'm busy doing a podcast," and then I thought, "Yeah,
You can have it all, Ben, because you're a boy boss.
We're working remotely."
Where were we?
We were, and they wanted Finlayson to represent them.
Right, and they wanted to put forward an argument on tikanga, which was ruled out of scope. And the Privileges Committee voted by majority, so the government members of the Privileges Committee handed down quite a steep determination that Rawiri Waititi, Debbie Ngā Rewa Paka would be barred from the House, suspended from the House for 21 days, which is a 7 times sterner punishment than the sternest in the books, while Hannah Rafti might be Clark for just 7 days.
And it was a majority, but not, would you say, a broad majority as had been recommended by the clerk of the House?
I'm not sure what the clerk, but that's interesting. I know that there is often a sense that in order for the Privileges Committee to have the ongoing authority, it needs to have that kind of cross.
Yeah, that's what Hipkins said
cross-party
in his speech yesterday, that it wasn't a broad majority, that they'd basically been advised by the clerk that you should try and come to like a broad consensus, which had not happened.
That's right. Can the Privileges Committee create a rock so heavy that it cannot carry it?
Thank you.
Or
yes.
What a beautiful metaphor.
Is the all power of the Privileges Committee divisible? Can you have a fraction? What is 3/5 of all powerful?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ben. Also, Pamjit Pawar of the ACT Party made inquiries about whether or not imprisonment might be one of the punishments that was open to the Privileges Committee. Very helpfully, they stressed that wasn't something they would have argued for, of course not, but they were just curious, just wondering, just wondering.
They just wanted to know the full scope. It's hilarious and also incredibly chilling.
Yeah, like when you go to the car yard, and you're looking at a V8, you're looking at a 4-liter beast, you're like, how fast could this go on the open road? And the car salesman was like, well, of course, much greater than the speed limit, and you're like, oh, of course. I mean, just hypothetically.
Like 240? What do you?
Look, good to know, really, just to,
And so we landed back in Parliament this week, ahead of which there was much speculation around whether or not a deal might need to be struck, because these punishments likely would mean that you would have the leaders of Te Pāti Māori, one of the parties represented in Parliament, absent for the budget, which we will get to later in the episode, reading out in full, in audio form. And so how would they deal with that? There was a suggestion that perhaps there might be a filibuster in some form, which would have happened yesterday.
How does a filibuster work in our Parliament?
How does a filibuster...
So in America, a filibuster is, you can speak on anything, and it's basically a test of physical endurance.
You can read the newspaper from front to back.
Yeah, or you pick up the phone book and read it, or you read out a contract law textbook or something. And go, what did Cory Booker do recently? Was it 20
That's
hours
right,
or
a
something?
new record, yeah. 24 hours,
He
maybe.
broke the
Sorry,
record.
what's the
long-running record.
Why would you do it?
The idea was that you would do it here, and I think the suggestion was it could potentially be done by everyone taking a call, because on an issue such as this, that every member of parliament, should they wish to speak, should be able to take a call. And the idea was that this might push it through to Wednesday,
Right.
and Wednesday being today is a members' day, I think, so
Got you.
that wouldn't work, and so then the debate would have to be adjourned until
So it's just a delay
after
tactic.
the budget. And as it happened, it was a people got quite head up about it. It was all the experts were loving it, but the Christopher Luxon said on Monday that there would be no concessions, absolutely no concessions. And then Chris Bishop got up and surprised everyone, including the Speaker, yesterday in Parliament, and said, "Actually, let's just adjourn the debate, shall we?"
Guess what, guys?
Like you wanted Labour, and Labour stands up and says, "How dare you? How dare you? How dare you not talk to us about this first? We were trying to talk to you." I mean, maybe they've got half a point there, but it is quite funny. We will vote against this measure that we had argued for. And
That's right. And Te Pāti Māori also voted against it.
But wait, wasn't there some funny thing though that he moved a motion that it be delayed until the 5th of June so that they could vote, on the budget, but if it happens then they still won't be allowed to because it doesn't happen until after that?
Yeah, the budget vote might be later than traditionally they tend to sort of go into urgency after the budget to pass urgent legislation pursuant to the budget, and then the budget debate sort of kind of rolls on for a bit. I think given, in terms of the votes, it's probably pretty immaterial. The opposition doesn't have enough votes to overturn the budget, although it's a confidence vote. But, based on what we saw yesterday, Chris Bishop might again adjourn it until after the budget debate. I don't think there's any real pain point for the government to just kind of delay it forever, in sort of the same way that the Te Pāti Māori did the Privileges Committee process itself.
the scene yesterday included, it's worth noting, a protest on the grounds of Parliament. So Te Pāti Māori's focus in large part was what was happening outside. And, they're probably, in a way, Te Pāti Māori might have voted against this because it probably works for them on a political level. The more this is in the foreground. What do you make of it all, Annabelle? I heard a great comment on Talkback Radio on the weekend where someone said, "This is not about tikanga. What's this ridiculous idea? It's about tikanga. The important thing is that the MPs stay 2.5 swords apart from each other."
I think the recommendation of the Privileges Committee to stand them down for 21 days is completely over the top. Also, symbolically, the fact that you would punish Te Pāti Māori for performing a haka with the most serious punishment ever meted out by the Privileges Committee by the power of 7, casts a long dark shadow over our democracy, I think.
The report, we should say, did emphasise the finger guns. The finger guns being pointed
the
at.
alleged finger guns.
The alleged finger guns.
Deb says that that's her style of witty, and
Yeah.
I haven't looked closely enough at it to see, but different people have different witty, whatever. I don't think that she would resile from the fact that she did it, if she did indeed do it.
She didn't. We don't know whether she went pew pew. There's no audio record of any pew pew.
I think the difficulty that the government. I read Thomas Coughlin's piece this morning, and he said that there is not broad accord even within National about the level of punishment. But the difficulty now is that it's such a unreasonable, unjustified length, of suspension, that it makes it very difficult to come down from there without losing face. So, you have Hipkins who is saying it should be, first strike 1 day, second strike 2 days, third strike 3 days sort of thing. There's a big difference between, 3 days
Fourth strike
or
prison.
even 5 days prison, and 21 days. I listened to Tanya Waikato on Morning Report, was it last week or earlier this week, who talked about Te Pāti Māori's decision not to appear in front of the Privileges Committee. And she put forward a good argument and raised the issue of, their tikanga expert not being allowed to appear, and, the issue around Christopher Finlayson. I can't help but personally think that it was a mistake not to take the opportunity to appear before the Privileges Committee. They have, there's important messages that they could convey, important arguments that they could have put up. As a party that is very good at using social media, I think that it was a lost opportunity. But also I think that, whenever you have the opportunity to put a statement in front of the Crown that advances Māori, tikanga Māori, that you should. So I think that was a mistake, and I think it was also a mistake personally to do an interview and be tearful about what has happened. They spoke with that. Julian Wilcox did an excellent interview with Rawiri Waititi and Deborah Ngāti-Wapeka, and they were very emotional. They talked about being hurt, feeling like they are not wanted or accepted into Parliament, the lack of aroha shown towards them, which I have incredible empathy for. It's a hard, lonely, difficult place for Māori MPs, but I think it was a mistake to have a tangi about that, because I think this is a very difficult time for Māori in general politically, and in these times Māori look to our political leaders to be strong, for strength, to keep fighting on our behalf. And so I think it's important that, as Matiu Rata used to say, however hard it might feel for Māori MPs inside the House, it's always much, much harder for Māori outside the House. So I'm not sure if that was, a great...
It's interesting. I mean, you could make the case that, in fact, that shows the scale of the feeling to present so humanly.
Perhaps, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot of people who feel that way. I personally have a different view on it, but I accept that kōrero would have resonated with a lot of people. I just think, given the timing of the pay equity issue and what some of our poorest wahine Māori workers have experienced in the last week, that also timing-wise it wasn't great either. I think it's incredibly unfair that Hannah is going to be punished twice. She's already been punished once. I think the hero of the day yesterday was Hipkins. I thought he gave an incredible speech on this issue.
In terms of that Hui interview with Julian, what struck me was how jarring it was. It was this sort of talking about being triggered by the report, being so upset at the punishment, when even mere days before they were basically, Te Pāti Māori was mocking the committee by posting the draft findings, which had been provided to them, I guess, for natural justice.
They did apologise for that, I believe.
On their Instagram. Well, yeah, they apologised and said it was a mistake, but then they didn't take it down from Instagram. All throughout the process, they were talking about, kangaroo courts. We're going to hold our own process. We don't recognise this process. And I thought it was sort of a kind of wet response in terms of the sort of, devil may care kind of nonchalance they were trying to show previously, which was then back again yesterday when they were in front of the protest, talking about, we'll never back down, we'll never, I think this whole thing has been, very sort of self-centred of the MPs. And I mean, we'll get on to other parties and other politicians who I think have been a bit sort of solipsistic and focused on themselves recently later. But I think, look, I haven't read the full submissions that they made to the Privileges Committee. What struck me is that in that same Morning Report interview, Tania Waikato said, yes, they intended to disrupt Parliament. The individual MPs, basically, when they have spoken about it, have talked about how they wanted to disrupt Parliament. They did not. There was no illusion that this was that this was in line with parliamentary procedure.
She quite rightly pointed out that it was an extraordinary piece of legislation that in the view of Te Pāti Māori required an extraordinary response, which I agree with.
Yeah,
right.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think that's the key, right? Is that when people talk about tikanga and incorporating tikanga into parliamentary processes, sure, absolutely, there have been moves, over time to incorporate different parts in terms of, the haka is hardly unknown in Parliament, or different kinds of haka are hardly unknown in Parliament. Essentially, I've been trying to isolate what is the tikanga that the Māori Party are arguing applies here. And when you boil it down, it seems to be what you were saying. It seems to be an assertion that if there is an issue that Te Pāti Māori and its MPs think is sufficiently important to them subjectively, they should always have the freedom to disrupt the House and its proceedings. Now, I think
that's a bit unfair, Ben. It's not like they're jumping up and doing it every other day. This was you would agree that it isn't a special piece of legislation.
For sure. But to the ACT Party, raising income tax would be an exceptional piece of legislation. To Simon O'Connor, reform of abortion law would be an exceptional piece of legislation. There will be exceptional pieces of legislation to every... There are
Are you seriously comparing the abortion law to the Treaty Principles Bill, though?
Well, in terms of the strong feelings that it stirs in some people, absolutely. Well, but in both sides, yeah, absolutely. That's the whole thing, is that politics affects, the most fundamental issues that we have, and for different people it will be different issues that really provoke them and stir their feelings and emotions. And I don't know how you incorporate a clause where you're allowed to bring the proceedings of the House to a halt if you personally feel moved by legislation. It seems an extraordinary demand from Te Pāti Māori. Now, the interesting
it's
thing
only
is that
extraordinary because it's a given that Parliament is not run currently in a way that incorporates tikanga Māori in the way that Māori might aspire it to be, and that Māori are having to push into those spaces.
But once again, what they seem to have been arguing for is that they are allowed to bring the House proceedings to a halt if it's something they feel strongly enough about. Now, if you extend that out to 123 members of Parliament, that's not a tenable rule. And Debbie Ngāti-Wapaka has said, we didn't think there was any other response. There was no other way of responding to this bill. Well, what about voting it down by 113 votes to 10 in the second reading? I mean, the bill went nowhere. The bill was destroyed, right? And I think that's the appropriate response to an exceptionally bad bill, which it was. And I don't understand what they thought was, if they thought that the mechanism of parliamentary democracy had totally failed, totally broken down, that's the point at which then you can take extraordinary action. But you have to recognise that it is a protest, it is a disruption, and so there will be, it is by definition a breach of privilege, and I think they intended it to be. In the same way as Winston Peters kind of pushing it and pushing it and pushing it until he gets thrown out. It's not done naively, and it's just hard to see what the failure here was, in the sense that the bill was absolutely destroyed. There were plenty of other options. There were 4 4 million submissions or something on the thing. We're backed in a corner. This is the last thing. There's nothing else to do, And so their arguments are very unconvincing on that.
I don't think it was necessarily that there was nothing else to do, but that it was seen as though the substance of it was such that it required that sort of level of response. I mean, take your point though. Like, there is a sense in which, in some way, whatever the rules are, the view was that a rule needed to be broken in order to make the point. Like there's the doing the haka, but sometimes there is, and that's sometimes from time to time, and exceptionally, one says, this is so important that bugger your conventions and your rules. I'm punching through that.
There's a saying that Professor Wharehuia Milroy used to use a lot, which is takahi te tikanga kia ora ai te tikanga, which basically means transgress tikanga so that tikanga endures, which is about sometimes you've got to break some rules for justice or righteousness to prevail, and I think this haka is an example of that. I think when we talk about, disrupting the House and interrupting the vote and all of those things, it's kind of been blown out of proportion. The votes had all been cast except for Te Pāti Māori's votes. And before Hannah led the haka, she cast their votes. They were the last party in the House to cast their votes. So in terms of tallying the votes, I think, even me who failed school C maths knew which way it was gonna go down. So I think that it's a little bit overblown to say that it prevented the legislation from tracking along because of this haka. In terms of should people be able to get up and do the haka for the abortion legislation or whatever, I'm not sure that you're comparing apples with apples here. As we saw, this provoked the largest hikoi in the history of New Zealand. I can't think of another protest where as many people have come out. It has essentially broke the website at Parliament, the number of submissions that were put forward. So this is an issue that's been important to both Māori and Pākehā alike, and provoked a lot more action, I think, than what your average piece of legislation have. But also in terms of values, it's subjective, isn't it? And so one of the things that's been talked about is, perhaps if they hadn't had moved forward and come as close as what they had to the ACT MPs or whatever, then it might have been okay. But Judith Collins has talked about it being intimidatory. But again, subjective, isn't it? Because when Julianne Genter walked across and threw her papers in front of a national MP and demanded that she read them, that too was an act of intimidation, for which she apologised. But I'm pretty sure that most people would have felt that it was unlikely that Julianne was going to bop him, and she faced no consequences for it. She wasn't punished by the Privileges Committee. Driving vehicles up the steps of Parliament, in an age where people drive cars into crowds and stuff, some people might consider that intimidatory. Most people would not, though, knowing that, it's an MP behind the wheel. Disrespectful of your whare, perhaps, your whare kōrero, your whare taupatu, but not intimidatory. I can't recall a time when I've seen a haka end in a punch-up, and I've certainly never seen anyone physically injured or threatened during a haka in Parliament. So I think sometimes a bit of common sense has to prevail when it comes to these issues. And while I accept that the Privileges Committee has the right to, decide an appropriate punishment, it has to be appropriate, and 21 days is not appropriate or proportional by a long shot, by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I think 21 days is, look, certainly it is probably disproportionate, and I think that if the government was sensible, they'd, give them a bit of a commuted sentence. Part of the issue, I think, is, as Thomas Coughlan wrote in his column and also over the weekend, Te Pāti Māori have so completely failed to engage in Parliament, except as basically a soundstage for social media clips, that they don't know a lot of basic procedure. They don't seem to be familiar with the standing orders or the procedures at all, even in terms of asking questions that fall within order during question time. And so I think to date, they have been treated kind of the same way that judges tend to treat defendants who are defending themselves in court. They kind of bend over backwards to give them the benefit of the doubt and to help them through and say, well, how could you be expected to know as a parliamentary party of 6 MPs with large state-funded resources behind you? How could you know what proper procedure is or the rules are? And this sort of willful ignorance that they keep on with has resulted in them being kind of treated with kid gloves. And so I think it probably is unfair to sort of immediately ratchet it up to where you would, right now, because I think they have been allowed to get away with, poor order, for so long.
I would say, can I just say one thing, Ben, on that? And it's just an observation, is that what I think is a bit unique about Te Pāti Māori, and I'm not making excuses for them, but it is an interesting observation, which is that they are very, very green to Parliament. It's like every other party, you have members in that party who have been there for a long time, who are very well versed in the tikanga of Parliament, and that's one thing that Te Pāti Māori doesn't have because it's literally been rebuilt after being turfed out of Parliament. So there's no seniors in there that bring that mātauranga to the party who might be able to, drill it into its MPs.
Interesting interview on Heather du Plessis-Allen last night on Tuesday evening with Te Rero Flavel, which slightly there's a sort of idea in some parts that this is a totally different Te Pāti Māori to the one that was before. And I think in many ways it is. But Flavel made an interesting point, which is that the history of Te Pāti Māori is pushing against some of the tikanga of Parliament, and that there is a continuation of that tradition.
This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Cadillac Certified Service Fresh Start Tire event. Visit Cadillac.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating U.S. GM dealers only. Highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends 5/31/2025. Not available with other offers.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/US/leading edge.
To draw a link, maybe this is forgive me if this feels tenuous, but leaping across to the other major parliamentary, highly theatrical moments of recent times is what began with an Andrea Vance column in the Sunday Star Times, I think Sunday before last now. I think everyone knows what we're talking about. I'm going to read it, so please cover your ears if you don't like words beginning with C. But she, in the course of a column, she sort of used the girl boss sort of motif and set up in relation to pay equity Andrea Vance wrote, "Turns out that you can have it all so long as you're prepared to be a cunt to the women who birth your kids, school your offspring and wipe the ass of your elderly parents while you stand on their shoulders to earn your 6-figure taxpayer-funded pay packet." So she was using that word, which is quite a word. You know, we know empirically that's the word, apart the N word slightly more, but that is considered beyond the realms of decorum and convention. And in a way, I think the decision was made, clearly with editors as well, and that's probably a debate for the media podcast The Fold rather than us, but to punch through to say, convention be damned, this is sufficiently important to Andrea Vance in that moment that she would, the Stuff / Post editors pointed out they'd used the word before, but it was in a very different context. It was in the context of, on the front page of an earlier post, in the context of some of the abuse that was being received by women politicians. So it was quite a big thing. That then led to questions around whether it had, in fact, helped out in some unintended way those who were defending the pay equity changes, because Nicola Willis responded with a piece. And then we had this interesting appearance in Parliament whereby Jan Tinetti, for reasons unknown, chose to put a question on notice about the column. She didn't mention that line in particular, but the important thing is that when you write your oral questions in Parliament are delivered to the government ministers such that they can prepare any material they need in order to answer the question properly. Sometimes they'll move a question to a more relevant minister. And when that landed in the office of the Brooke Van Velden and the wider ACT party, they would have been thrilled, because here was an opportunity to prepare a response that was strong. And one of the most cutting things in the Andrea Vance column, by the way, though it was parenthetical, was saying how some of Brooke Van Velden's ACT colleagues called her Brooke GPT, that she has an automaton type appearance or delivery. And you know what? She put the lie to that in the House. She was amazing. She used the word, you know.
Grok Van Velden.
Okay, but you know, she was really impressive. And then the whole thing kind of spun out into, you know, Winston Peters declaring how it was a house of chaos. And a lot of people finding, you know, the sign of him quite enjoying denouncing these people for their nonsense in the Houses of Parliament, which somehow then fed through to him getting into an argument. I don't know why it's the same thing, but it is him at the Wellington railway station having a stand-up argument with a guy and telling him to naff off, and that he appeared to, you know, that the guy said that he was bollocks, and he said, "You look like..." But anyway, it was all this stuff.
Can I say, the bit that was weird was, why did he say that thing about is sunbathing on a Thursday Māorification? Like, what was that about? And then he got kicked out of the House.
Oh, right, yeah. That was a reference, I think,
yesterday
to a question that had been put to Luxon the other earlier. Yeah,
Deb Ngāti-Wapaka put it to Luxon, and that was so weird.
I mean, a lot of, you know, like Winston Peters complaining about disorder in the House is like a cactus complaining about prickles, you know. What to make of all of this, Annabelle? Do you reckon that in the end, when the net result is that we're not talking about pay equity, are we, at this stage right now?
Can I start by saying that we had Rachel McIntosh, who's the National Secretary for Etu Union, on Mata last week. If you haven't listened to the interview, you should, because it's really insightful, and she talks about the ordinary lives of these women who are just trying to live a life of dignity, but by being paid fairly. She said something in that interview that really struck me, which was, Mihi said, for some of these women it's 30%. It's a lot of money. What does that actually look like for them? And she said, for some women, it's the difference between whether or not you can enroll your kids in sport or not. I think that's so incredibly powerful, because we've just spent 3 years raging against ram raiders, these youth that are committing retail crime, we know that one of the best things that we can do for our kids is to get them into sports, because not only does it occupy their time and keep them out of trouble, but the educational opportunities. I have a niece that's about to graduate from a university in the US because she went there on a basketball scholarship. Very proud of my niece and her mama, my cousin. These things are incredibly important, and if you don't want more ram raiders, then you should be paying parents a decent wage so that they can afford to enrol their kids in sports and they can afford to pay for shoes. So I just want to start this kōrero by actually talking to the issue of what's going on with these wahine. Secondly, I want to say I think it was an absolute tour de force of a column by Andrea Vance, and I think Andrea and Tracy Watkins are two of the smartest women in journalism. And the entire column is, excoriating and powerful and well worth a read. And I have to admit, I've spent the last week having lots of conversations with different women about the use of the C word in the column. And I've come to the conclusion that I think it was absolutely the right thing to do, and used to great and powerful effect. And it's actually an example of a Pākehā woman being able to use their platform and their power in a very meaningful way. I think Andrea Vance is able to say that word in a way where it is provocative and thought-provoking and debate-provoking, whereas I feel that, because of racism and hypocrisy and all of those things, if it was to be a wahine who said it, it would be considered coarse and inappropriate. I think I commend Brooke for having the balls to say the C word in Parliament. Good on her. She committed to the bit. She did her homework and she stood up for herself. I think it's abhorrent to me that that the column has been weaponised so that powerful women can play victim when they've disenfranchised hundreds of thousands of working poor women from earning the salary they deserve and being able to provide a life of dignity for themselves and their whānau. But I think the ultimate loser in this debate, of course, besides from these working women, is Jan Tinetti. What on earth was she thinking?
Well, look, I remember thinking at around the time that Labour did its little mini reshuffle that it was an odd move to replace Camilla Bellich, who's a former union lawyer, very impressive in that area, from the workplace relations portfolio, which is a really key portfolio for a Labour Party, obviously, and even more so, I think, under this government, where there is significant reform happening, for the opposition. I thought it was a very interesting move, since Jan, a former Gone By Lunchtime alumni, look, she has an education professional background. She hasn't been a particularly impressive parliamentary performer or political performer. And I think, I think Hipkins will be maybe kicking himself for that decision right now.
It is worth saying just quickly that, as Chris Hipkins himself pointed out, there's a process for those questions, so we probably shouldn't hang it all on Jan Tinetti. There's a whole team that go through and, spitball and then design and then finesse those questions as best they can.
But I think the other thing is, look, it's kind of depressing. I think for in large part in a very similar way to the way that the ongoing Te Pāti Māori navel gazing over their haka and their seeming aggrievement at being punished or receiving any kind of sanction for it. In the same way, I don't think that a newspaper column about politics should be the subject of parliamentary debate. It's not that important. I think tactically this has been extremely useful for National and ACT with the pay equity issue. I think that was turning into a big political problem for them. I think it remains a reasonably big political problem, but some of the sting, I think, was taken out of it by this kind of cul-de-sac of debating the C word. And look, I don't think it was entirely cynical. I think that the ministers concerned were genuinely upset and offended. At the same time, I don't care. I don't, as a taxpayer and a voter, they're entitled to their feelings, and I think that, in terms of, misogynistic language, attacks on women MPs, absolutely, these are all concerns. They can be talked about in interviews, outside. I don't think they're not really a matter for, it's a column attacking ministers, even in terms that I personally think it was a mistake to use. I think that the traditional media, I'm an old man, I think the traditional media should try and maintain standards that are a little higher than Twitter. I suppose they're still a little higher because they don't spell it out. But at the same time, it's just this solipsism. It's this, the idea that Parliament is a place where MPs should be talking about their own feelings and how they feel aggrieved personally by the discourse, and it's all hollow and it's symbolic and it's just sort of an extension, I think, of, using question time as fodder for social media rather than trying to get information. Same with speeches, instead of trying to make points, just trying to get a grab. I just find the whole sort of spectacle, extremely sort of depressing. I don't think that, it sort of, and look, I think, there is a coarsening of the discourse and of the debate. We see it. It didn't used to be as common for people to be heckling politicians doing stand-ups outside. Social media, things like Twitter and blogs before it really seem to have given, people this sort of idea about what's acceptable conduct that I just think is, and I think it's dynamic. I think, the public conduct affects how our MPs portray themselves because they're going for a certain vibe on all of their clips. And then I think that reflects back to the public who see how they're behaving. So, I think Winston Peters has a point, albeit maybe one of the worst people to be trying to deliver it about the conduct of our MPs. I find the way that it's going pretty grim.
I think, it's, and I don't know because I don't know Andrea, but I think it, if you look to that old adage, journalism is about, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That's certainly what she achieved in that column. I think if there was a flaw in it, it's that she didn't preempt or anticipate the way the use of the C word would be seized upon to hijack the debate away from the woman that it's meant to be for, and by the women who are in power. And I think that that's probably, it would have been great if that had been addressed in the original column, but,
Apparently
she did a great follow-up.
This is scuttlebutt, but apparently the original column had more in it and got hosed down a bit, so that was there. And don't know if this is true, but apparently the original headline on it was the motherfucker of all budgets. So that brings us nicely to
we can see the legacy of that. Hopefully raised standards. Yesterday, Nicola Willis said that this will be a no BS budget, by which I think she meant no swear words.
And didn't Winston call Hipkins a sausage eater this week? Did you see that?
Does he eat sausages sideways?
He's a sausage eater who doesn't know what a woman is. Yeah. I'm like, what does that mean?
Oh, it's all.
Yeah, was he reaching for sort of sausage roll eater? Or was
I don't know, but I was like...
Or was it an attempt that failed that then became crass by accident?
Probably something from a Tommy Cooper routine.
There's a lot going on.
In the 17th century. Now, Budget quickly. Just a couple of thoughts on the budget. What? You want to go? Any thoughts on the budget? I mean, I won't go through it. I just want to say one of the interesting things around this pay equity point, and Julie Angenta, aforementioned, put this question to Brooke Van Velden during the urgent committee stage of the bill about if the government says that most of the 33 that have been halted would then come through under this system, albeit with some slightly tightened rules, then when are they going to book the money for it? Because in a way it's just kicking a can down the road. It's a large sum of money that was important for this budget, but I'd be interested to see that in the budget. I'm interested to see whether this depreciation rules changes. Sounds nerdy, but if you talk to people in manufacturing and tech, they say it's really important in terms of the speed at which you can depreciate on technology and machinery.
Sounds super boring, Tobe. Keep
Sounds
going.
boring. The $521, whether that gets touched in terms of, addressing the KiwiSaver point.
Yeah. That bit we care about, yeah.
Some very good columns, by the way, just quickly on the slide on that by Fran O'Sullivan recently around the whole super issue, the super powder keg and how you address that. What else are you looking for in the budget, Annabelle?
I like it when they announce stuff that's already in there.
Right.
When they're like
they're going to spend it again.
$10 million for screening, blah, blah, but it's actually been there the whole time. Yeah. So I like to keep a little tally of those ones. Yeah. It's quite fun.
And what about you, Ben? Is there anything you're looking for?
Well, that will be the interesting thing is that, there's not basically any new money really once you take into account the pre-announcements from even before this, couple of week period where there's been sort of a flurry.
But don't you reckon not that many, compared to Labor? Like Labor were doing pre-announcements like 6 months before the budget came out, and you get about 25 million every day. But this year I feel it's quieter.
Labor was sitting on their $80 billion borrowed for their COVID response fund, which ended up, sort of funding, I think, kangaroo culling and wallaby culling in the South Island.
They also did like to do an announcement that they would be doing an announcement about a pre-budget thing, and then they would announce it in triplicate across 3. Like it got to the point where it was just, we
love an announcement.
Fill the feed.
Grant Robertson was basically doing Brewster's Millions of desperately trying to spend $80 billion within 3 years. Kind of the reverse issue now for the government. And so I think what's going to be interesting is trying to find where those reprioritizations are, where the cuts have been made, because a lot of that won't be sort of apparent immediately. You might see a little bit of a change in a line item, but it might take a while to kind of drill down and figure out what that actually means. So, yeah, those will be the sorts of things that we're sort of looking at.
Very good. So stick around. We'll begin the full reading of the budget in just a few moments. Otherwise, catch you soon. Look after yourself out there. Kia ora.
Chapter 1.
The Spin-off Podcast Network.